All right, well, hi everybody. I thought today would be a great opportunity to talk about the connection between guilt, shame, and anger. And thank you to those of you who have been very kindly pointing out to me that it's been a little while since my last video. That's nice to hear that there's value and that you're getting something out of the videos. I had done a post around the guilt, shame, anger dance on Instagram a few days ago, and I thought it was a really good topic that's worth some verbal explanation and exploration. So I thought that that would be a good jumping off point to get back into a YouTube video. I think lately life has just been so busy and my work's been really busy, which is great to a certain extent, but the downside of that is that it's reflective of how mental health is really kind of catching up with people, especially as the COVID pandemic is continuing and people are recognizing that they need some extra support. And I'm hearing from a lot of new clients that they've wanted to reach out for support for a long time, but just never took the initiative or had the time or the courage to get around to it. And now they're recognizing that they're in a place that they need that support. They're not going anywhere. And so they've decided to take that step, which is awesome, but it definitely does put a strain on my calendar. And therefore, in my time outside of work, I'm just really enjoying relaxing and rejuvenating. But nevertheless, videos like this periodically fit in. So here I am. I have to admit that just a few days ago, I myself got caught in the guilt, shame, anger dance. And luckily, because I'm aware and because I'm with a partner that we've been together for a long time, we've gone through lots of communication experiments and explorations and opportunities that we were able to navigate out of it quite quickly. But I could definitely see, it was just another reminder to me how closely connected all of these different experiences are. So what do I mean about the guilt, shame, anger dance? Well, I can guarantee that you've experienced this in your communication with friends, with colleagues, with strangers on the street, and especially with very close loved ones. And what I'm meaning is that when something happens, it can be a situation, it can be a memory, it can literally be triggered by anything, but just something happens and we feel guilty. Maybe it's something we've done in the past, maybe it's something we've just said or done or not done. Might not even be connected directly to the person that we're interacting with, but the long and the short of it is that our guilt button is pushed. We're not feeling super good about something that we've done. So now we're already kind of feeling bad, and now we're in an interaction. Now, the interesting thing about this is that guilt button could have been pushed before. It has nothing to do with the person that it's in front of you. And yet, because that guilt button is pushed, now you're bringing that guilt mindset and feeling into that interaction with that person. Guilt can also certainly stir up some of that underlying shame. And for some people, it might be a shame button that's pushed, even more so than a guilt button. What do I mean by that? Just not feeling very good about yourself as a person. Maybe not feeling like you're content with who you are, where you're at in your life. An unsettled feeling, discontentedness at a very deep fundamental level. That's where shame sits. So it can be our guilt button, it can be the shame button, could be both at the same time, that lead us to be very vulnerable when we're interacting. And now when the guilt or the shame buttons are active, to be honest, it doesn't take very much for the anger reaction to fly. And again, this is something that when you start to pay attention to it, you really start to notice it. And I think it really hit home for me, the connection with this, probably about 5 or 7 years ago, that I was in a movie theater you could actually do that. And there was people around at the time. This was way prior to COVID dates. And I was sitting in a theater, and the row behind me, they had just started in the theater to do the assigned seating. So you have your tickets with your assigned seat on it. And there was some people sitting in the row behind me, and this family, led by a dad, comes up to the people sitting in the row, shows them the ticket and says, "Excuse me, I think you're sitting in our seats." Now the guy who was sitting already in these seats behind, he had clearly made a mistake. He was not honoring whatever seat number was on his ticket. And rather than be gracious, be kind, move, and just resolve the whole situation, his guilt button was pushed. Maybe it was related to being in the wrong seat, but it could have been related to something else going on in his life. So how did he respond? With anger. He started to get really irritable and grumpy and fought with the other dad who was trying to show him that he was in the wrong seat. And eventually he moved on. It didn't escalate to an extreme extent. However, it can. And this is where people can get into road rage incidents, fights, physical, emotional, mental altercations, because that button and that reaction to defend and protect ourselves is so strong. And that's the reason that I believe that so many of our anger responses are fueled by this guilt shame response. Certainly, I'm not going to say all, because there are times where we're angry because we feel violated, we feel put upon, our boundaries have been infiltrated, and that doesn't feel okay. However, even in those moments, there can still be some guilt or shame that tags along, because our brain says, I should have done better, or I could have clarified my boundaries more. And so now we're feeling somewhat responsible and bad about whatever boundary violation or harm has come to us. And hence we respond in anger to try and protect and to try and compensate for that. So this guilt, shame, anger thing, it's a very protective part of ourselves. We really are trying to hold on to our core understanding of who we are, what we value about ourselves, who we are in the world. And anger is our way of protecting that. When we're angry and lashing out, we're trying to show that we're strong, we're brave, we're competent, we're together. We're not the guilt or the shame messages that our brain or even external sources may be telling us. So what does this mean for your communication style? Well, I would certainly recommend that you pay a lot more attention as you're going through life to when you're noticing that you get irritable, as well as when you get angry. And in those moments, if you're not able to in the moment, then certainly afterwards, to look back at that and ask, was there guilt or was there shame present? Now, this requires honesty, and this requires that ability to self-reflect, which most of you watching out there will have. But it's taking that time to look at, okay, what was my feelings going into that interaction? Where was the guilt coming from? Where was the shame coming from? And how did those lead me to act? Now, to be more preventative and proactive, if we can start to work on dealing with those pockets of guilt or shame, which might mean increasing our self-worth, increasing self-esteem, living more congruently and authentically, doing things and being able to apologize, be honest, be humble. Like, there's a lot of personal growth work that may go into trying to lower your level of guilt as well as shame, as well as to then work on humility, awareness, accountability, and owning up to your feelings and your reactions in that moment where anger is what wants to come forward. You won't always be able to stop anger from coming forward. Anger's not a bad thing. We don't need to make it go away completely, but we do need to try to be quite mindful and quite aware of how intensely it's coming out and how much it's impacting our interactions. You may need to take a break. You may need to let that level of anger subside before you come back to the interaction. But when you're feeling in a fairly calm place, I hope that you will challenge yourself to even out with the person that you were having this anger back and forth with, that you may want to share about the guilt, shame place that that response was coming from. This can help to foster empathy. It can help to foster more open and real dialogue between you and that other person, rather than both just getting caught in kind of who's right, who's wrong, what's actually going on, and the facts of the situation, which is where communication derails, rather than just coming back to each person's own experience and where both people are coming from. This is part of being vulnerable in our interactions, and it has a profound impact on intimacy. That may not always be appropriate. If this is in a professional context, it may not be appropriate, and you may not feel safe or comfortable sharing about those guilt or shame buttons to a very deep extent. But you still may be able to comment on that in a professional context, that perhaps you're feeling guilty about a certain project that you're working on. And then when somebody's bringing forward some feedback or perceived criticism, you're getting very upset and very angry and defensive about that. Rather than just stay in the anger and defensiveness, it is an option to acknowledge to that other person, hey, I am actually struggling with my feelings about this project. It's been a really difficult project to work on, and I recognize that my reaction there wasn't about you, but more about some other things that are going on. This is a really good way to diffuse a situation and to get both people back on target and back on discussion topic, rather than diverting into defensiveness to protect our own ego and our own integrity and self-worth. This is something that you can benefit from perhaps talking to another healthcare professional about. It's a great thing to process with a therapist or a counselor. It's also something you can explore more in journaling, self-reflection, just talking with friends or other confidants in your life, just to gain more awareness, which then will support you in the action of doing different. I wish you all the best in your exploration of the guilt, shame, anger dance. I hope this gives you some interesting food for thought to really look at the role of guilt and shame in your anger responses, and to look at how you can look after yourself and maybe lower the level of guilt and shame, and see how that will lower the amount of anger that comes up in your communication and your dynamics with others. It is my hope that people can improve the quality of their relationships with themselves, as well as the quality of their relationships with others. And this is, from my perspective, a very key skill in doing that, because it connects very much and very deeply to our relationship with ourselves, but has a very direct impact on our relationship with others. Thank you so much for tuning in and for being patient between videos, and I wish you the best. If there's any topics or things that you would like me to explore in a future video, please feel free to put a comment in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you and to know what's on your mind and what's important to you to learn more about and to work on right now. In the meantime, take care of yourself. All the best, and bye for now.